signed the Official Secrets Act when I was 26 years old. I signed it in a small, wood-paneled office in central London, in front of a man whose name I never learned, on a Tuesday morning in March. I am telling you this story now because the act expires after 50 years, and because the man whose name I never learned died in 2019, and because I am 64 years old, and because I am not afraid of the consequences anymore. There are no consequences left that frighten me as much as the consequences of not telling. The base was called Croftholm. You will not find it on any map. You will not find any reference to it in any declassified document. The Croftholm I am about to describe is not the Croftholm that the Ministry of Defense acknowledges. The Croftholm the Ministry of Defense acknowledges was a small radar installation in the Scottish Highlands that operated from 1947 to 1973 and was decommissioned for budgetary reasons. That base existed. I have seen the public records. The radar was real, but the base did not close in 1973. The radar was decommissioned. The base was renamed. I was sent there in March of 1986, 3 months after I qualified as a doctor. I was an RAF reservist. The posting came through normal channels. The paperwork said medical support, signals intelligence facility, Scottish Highlands, classification restricted. The salary was unusually high. The contract was for 12 months. I want to tell you what I expected. I expected a small radar station, 40 or 50 staff, boring postings, 3 meals a day, books in the evenings, snow on the hills for most of the year. I thought it would be uneventful. I thought it would look good on my service record. I want you to understand what I did not know when I drove up the single-track road through the glen on the afternoon of the 12th of March, 1986. I did not know that Croftholm had 19 permanent staff. Most of them had been there for between 15 and 40 years. The base commander, a group captain named Hargreaves, had been at Croftholm since 1962, 24 years on the same posting. That is not normal. RAF officers rotate every 3 to 5 years. I did not know that the base had 4 levels below ground. I did not know that the radar had been decommissioned because the base had stopped needing to look at the sky. I did not know what was kept on the 4th level. I am going to tell you what I learned over the course of the 11 months I served there. I am going to tell you in order, the way it happened, because I want you to understand how a person can be eased into knowing something that they would not have agreed to know if they had been told all at once. I arrived at Croftholm at 3:30 in the afternoon. The base was set in a narrow valley between 2 low mountains, surrounded by pine forest. The buildings were red brick and concrete, low and military, in the unmistakable style of mid-century RAF construction. There was a perimeter fence with razor wire on top. There was a small guardhouse at the gate. The guard at the gate did not ask my name. He looked at my face, looked at a clipboard, and waved me through. I parked outside the main administrative building. A woman in RAF uniform came out to meet me. Her name was Wing Commander Iris Davies. She was perhaps 55 years old. She had a kind face. She offered to carry my bag. She led me into the building. She showed me to my quarters. The quarters were small but comfortable. A single room with a bed, a desk, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out at the forest. There was a kettle on the desk. There were biscuits. Iris told me that the base commander wanted to see me before dinner. She told me dinner was at 7. She told me to wear my uniform. She left me to unpack. I unpacked. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the window and I watched the forest. I noticed, after about 20 minutes, that there were no birds in the forest. I had been raised in the highlands. I had grown up with the sound of the forest. The absence of birdsong in the woods in March is not normal. The breeding season would have started. The trees should have been loud. The forest outside my window was completely silent. I told myself I was tired. I had driven for 9 hours that day. I had been awake since 5 in the morning. I needed to settle in. I met Group Captain Hargreaves at 6 o'clock in his office on the ground floor of the administrative building. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and very pale blue eyes. He stood up when I came in. He shook my hand. He told me I was very welcome at Croftholm. He sat down behind his desk. He gestured for me to sit opposite him. Then he said, "I want to ask you a question before we discuss your duties. I want you to answer honestly. There is no wrong answer." I told him to go ahead. He said, "Do you believe that everything that exists in the world is something that can be explained by science?" I thought about the question. I told him that I believed everything that existed could probably be explained by science eventually, even if our current science was not yet adequate to explain it. He nodded slowly. He said, "That is a good answer. That is the answer most of my staff would have given when they first arrived. I will tell you now that you will not give the same answer in 12 months. I did not know how to respond to that. He said, "Doctor, Croftholm is a containment facility. We contain something here. The thing we contain has been at this site since 1947. It is the responsibility of the British government to keep it here. It has been the responsibility of the British government to keep it here for 78 years. It will continue to be the responsibility of the British government to keep it here until the world ends, or until our species is extinguished, whichever happens first." He paused. He said, "Your duties will involve medical support to the staff who work with it. You will not be required to interact with the thing itself. You will not be required to go below the 3rd level. The 4th level is restricted to staff who have undergone preparation that you will not undergo. Is that clear?" I said yes. He said, "Good. Welcome to Croftholm. Dinner's at 7. We dress for dinner here. It is one of the small traditions we maintain." I left his office. I want to be honest with you. I did not believe him. I thought he was testing me. I thought it was an initiation prank for new arrivals. I thought I would walk down to dinner and find the rest of the officers laughing about it. I did not find that. I found 19 people sitting at a long wooden table in the officers' mess. They were dressed in formal mess uniforms, the kind worn for important occasions. They had laid a place for me at the end of the table. The food was served by 2 enlisted men in white jackets. There was wine. Nobody made a joke about Hargreaves' speech. Nobody made eye contact with me for the first half of the meal. Iris, who was sitting next to me, was the only one who spoke to me, and she spoke about the weather, the road conditions, the books I had brought with me. It was the most normal dinner I have ever sat through, and it was the most frightening meal of my life, because 19 people were behaving as though nothing unusual had been said to me that afternoon. At about 9 o'clock, after the meal, a woman across the table, a squadron leader named Margaret Coombe, the chief engineer, caught my eye. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she said very simply, "You'll be all right. Just don't ask to see it." That was the only acknowledgement anyone made of what Hargreaves had told me. I went back to my quarters. I slept badly. The next 4 weeks were uneventful. I held medical clinic 3 mornings a week. I treated minor complaints, sprains, sore throats, 1 case of mild depression that I referred up the chain. I did weekly health checks on the permanent staff. I cleaned the medical bay. I read in the evenings. The base operated on a normal RAF schedule. Reveille at 6, lights out at 22:30, patrols of the perimeter every 2 hours. The kitchen made tea at 4 in the afternoon. The chaplain, who came up from Inverness every other Sunday, held services in a small chapel on the ground floor. Nothing about the base itself suggested anything was unusual, except the staff did not talk about their work. When I did weekly health checks, I asked the standard questions: any pain, any difficulty sleeping, any changes in appetite, and the answers were always brief and professional. I asked about their jobs to make conversation. They deflected. The staff did not leave the base for personal reasons. They went home on rotation, 2 weeks off after every 6 weeks on. But nobody went into Inverness on their off days. Nobody went hiking on the surrounding hills. Nobody invited family to visit, even on rotation. The staff drank a great deal. I noticed this in the 3rd week. The mess bar was open from 18:30 to 2300 every evening. It was busy every single night. People drank steadily, but did not seem to get visibly drunk. They drank in a methodical way, as if the alcohol was a medication. Iris told me, when I asked her about this in week 4, that drinking was tolerated at Croftholm because it was easier than the alternative. I asked her what the alternative was. She said, thinking about it. The first incident happened in week 5. I was in the medical bay at about 8:30 in the evening. I had stayed late to write up some paperwork. The medical bay was on the ground floor, near the eastern side of the administrative building. The window of the medical bay looked out at the perimeter fence and the forest beyond. I heard a sound from below the building. I want to describe this sound. It was not a sound I had heard at Croftholm before. It was low. It came up through the floor. It was rhythmic. It had a pattern to it, like a heartbeat, but slower, approximately 1 pulse every 4 seconds. I sat very still and I listened. The pulse continued for about 3 minutes. Then it stopped. About 30 seconds after it stopped, all the lights in the medical bay dimmed by about 10%. They stayed dimmed for perhaps another 30 seconds. Then they returned to normal. I packed up my paperwork and I went to find Iris. I found her in the officer's mess. She was reading. The bar was open and there were about a dozen people in the room, all drinking quietly. I asked her quietly what I had heard. She put down her book. She looked at me carefully. She said, "Did the lights dim afterwards?" I told her they had. She said, "That was a feeding. We are required to feed it every 9 days. The lights dim because the generators draw extra current for the procedure. The pulse is the containment system stabilizing afterwards. You may notice the same pattern every 9 days. You are not required to do anything about it. You will not see anything. You will not be involved." I asked her what it was being fed. She said, "That is not information that I am authorized to share with you, doctor. I am sorry." She picked up her book again. I went back to my quarters. I did not sleep well that night either. The second incident happened in week 7. A man named Corporal Andrews was brought to the medical bay at 3 in the morning. He was 23 years old. He had been on perimeter patrol. He was conscious, but he was not responding to questions normally. He stared past me when I tried to make eye contact. His skin was very cold. His pupils were unevenly dilated. I checked him over. I could not find anything physically wrong with him. His blood pressure was elevated, but not dangerously so. His pulse was steady. He was breathing normally. But he kept saying the same phrase, over and over, in a quiet, calm voice. He said, "It knows where I am. It knows where I am. It knows where I am." I asked him what knew where he was. He looked at me. He focused for the first time since they had brought him in. He said, The thing on the fourth level. I went down there. I should not have gone down there. I went down there because I wanted to know. It looked at me. It knows where I am now. I asked him to clarify. I asked him what he had seen. He shook his head. He said, "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should not have gone. He died at 4 in the morning. There was no obvious cause of death. His heart simply stopped. He had been 23 years old, 6'2", fit, with no medical history. The postmortem was conducted by a doctor I never met, who came up from London by helicopter the next day. I was not allowed to be present. The official cause of death was recorded as cardiac arrhythmia, undetermined etiology. His family were told he had died of a heart attack in his sleep. I asked Hargreaves, the next day, what had happened. Hargreaves looked at me for a long moment. He said, "Corporal Andrews accessed an area of the base where he was not authorized to be. He looked at something he was not authorized to look at. The thing he looked at returned his attention. He died because that level of attention is not survivable for an unprepared mind." He paused. He said, "I am sorry that you had to be involved in this. I am sorry that you have learned more than you signed up to learn. If you wish to be transferred away from Croftholm, I can arrange it. I can also arrange that the events of last night never appear on your service record." I thought about it. I told him I would stay. I want to tell you why I stayed. I want to be honest about it. I stayed because I had begun to understand that something extraordinary was happening at Croftholm, and that almost nobody in the world knew about it. I was 26 years old. I had a sense of myself as someone who did not run from things. I believed I could handle what I was learning, and I believed that staying would teach me something I could not learn anywhere else. I was wrong about all of those things, but I stayed. In week 10, Iris invited me to walk with her on the morning after a feeding. The feedings happened every 9 days at 20:30 in the evening. We had become accustomed to the pulse and the dimming lights. The base was always quieter the morning after a feeding. People moved more carefully. The drinkers in the mess drank a little more. Iris and I walked along the perimeter inside the fence. It was a cold morning in early May. The sky was gray and low. There were still no birds in the forest. She said, "I am going to tell you what I am not supposed to tell you. I am going to do it because Andrews died, and because someone should know, and because I am 61 years old, and I have been here for 27 years, and I am tired of carrying this on my own." I did not say anything. She said, "The thing on the fourth level was found in 1947 by a team of geologists who were doing seismic surveys for the Ministry of Defense. They were looking for places to bury bomb shelters. They drilled into a chamber underneath this valley. The chamber was already there. The thing was in the chamber. It had been there for a very long time before anyone drilled into it." She said, "We do not know what it is. We have a theory. The theory is that it is something that predates our species. The theory is that it has been asleep in the rock under this valley for a length of time we cannot accurately estimate, but that is certainly longer than human history. The theory is that we drilled into its sleep and that we cannot put it back." She paused. She said, "We feed it, because if we do not feed it, it begins to wake up. When it wakes up, it reaches out with its mind. It reaches out a long way. We have learned that it can reach out at least 100 miles when it is hungry. We have learned this because in 1953 we tried to stop feeding it. We thought we could starve it back to sleep. We were wrong." I asked her what had happened in 1953. She said, "People in the surrounding villages began to behave strangely. By the end of the week of starvation, 11 civilians in the highlands had committed suicide. 3 more had killed members of their families. We resumed feeding it on day 8. The behavioral anomalies stopped within 48 hours. She stopped walking. She looked at me. She said, "We cannot put it back. We cannot kill it. We cannot move it. We can only feed it. The Croftholm protocol is the only protocol we have ever developed that keeps it stable. The Soviets had something similar, somewhere in the Urals. The Americans have something similar in Nevada. The French had something in Algeria until 1962, and we do not know what happened to it after they withdrew." She started walking again. She said, "There are at least 4 of these things on this planet. Probably more. Every nuclear power on Earth knows about them. They are the actual reason the nuclear powers do not go to war with each other. We have made an agreement that we will all continue to feed our things, because if any of them wake up properly, none of us will survive it." I asked her what we feed it. She did not answer for a long time. Then she said, "Doctor, I am going to tell you. I am going to tell you because if I do not tell you, you will keep asking, and one day, you will go and look, and you will die, the way Andrews died." She said, "We feed it people." She said, "We feed it prisoners. We feed it people who were going to die anyway. We feed it terminal cancer patients who have volunteered. We feed it convicted murderers who were going to be hanged before hanging was abolished. And then we fed it convicted murderers who were going to die in prison anyway. We feed it Soviet defectors who never made it home. We have fed it approximately 1,400 people since 1947. We feed it one person every 9 days." She said, "The people are not killed. They are lowered into the chamber on the 4th level. The chamber is sealed. The thing does not eat them in the way you are imagining. We do not know what it does to them. We do know that they cease to exist as people, approximately 3 minutes after being lowered. After that, the thing is satisfied for 9 days. I want to tell you that I went to Hargreaves, and I reported what Iris had told me. I did not do that. I want to tell you that I packed my bag that night, and I drove out of Croftholm, and I went to a newspaper. I did not do that either. I want to tell you what I did do. I finished my year. I served the remaining 4 months of my contract at Croftholm. I held my clinics. I did my weekly checks. I attended the dinners. I drank in the mess in the evenings, like the others, methodically, like a medication. I never went below the 3rd level. I never asked to see the chamber. I never spoke to anyone else at Croftholm about what Iris had told me. I signed my discharge papers on the 11th of March, 1987. I drove out of Croftholm on the 12th. I never went back. For 39 years, I have lived with what I learned. I have not told my husband. I have not told my children. I have not told my friends. I have lived an ordinary life as a GP in a small practice in the south of England. I have thought about Croftholm every day. I am telling you this story now because I read in the news last week that there has been an incident at a former MOD facility in the Scottish Highlands. The news said it was a fire at a decommissioned radar installation. The news said 3 personnel had been killed. I know what those words mean. The Croftholm protocol has been running for 78 years, 27 years longer than I served there. If they have had a fire, it is because the protocol has broken. If the protocol has broken, they will be trying very hard to repair it. I do not know if they will succeed. I am 64 years old. I have a husband I love. I have 2 grown children. I have a granddaughter. I am writing this because I want them to understand, if something happens, why it happened. I want them to understand that what happens in the Highlands will not stay in the Highlands. I want them to understand that the radius is at least 100 miles when it is hungry. and that we do not know what the radius is when it is fully awake. I want them to know. I am sorry that I did not say anything sooner. I am sorry that none of us said anything. We thought we were buying time. I am no longer sure what we were buying.